Havana, 1959. The streets are on fire with joy. People are dancing, screaming, weeping with relief. The dictator Batista fled into the night without a word, and a tall, bearded man in a green military uniform enters the city like a conquering hero. Fidel Castro, 33 years old, a lawyer who became a revolutionary who just took an entire country by force. The crowd erupts around him. The international press adores him completely. America watches with cautious curiosity. Nobody knew what was coming next. Nobody could have known, because the man entering Havana on that day was not the savior everyone believed him to be. He was the beginning of 50 years of dictatorship, 50 years of fear, 50 years during which an entire island became a prison with no visible walls. But Castro's story did not begin with the revolution. It began with ambition that had no ceiling, and with an intelligence that could convince anyone of anything at any time. Fidel Castro was born in 1926, the son of a wealthy sugarcane plantation owner in rural Cuba, raised with privilege and comfort, educated in the finest Jesuit schools in the country. A young man who was intelligent, dominant, impossible to ignore. At university, Castro was not studying law. He was studying power, how it is won, how it is kept, how it is used against those who stand in your way. He involved himself in every political movement he could find. He spoke for hours without ever growing tired or losing the room. He convinced people who had absolutely nothing in common to fight together for the same cause. He had a rare gift, a dangerous gift. He could make people believe that he was the only solution to everything. And Cuba in the 1950s was the perfect ground for a man exactly like him. Batista ran the island like his personal property. Corruption at every single level of government. Extreme poverty while a small group of wealthy elites gambled in casinos. The Americans controlled the economy from a distance. Ordinary Cubans had nothing, no voice, no future, no one willing to speak for them. Castro saw all of this. He understood all of this, and he knew exactly how to use all of this. In 1953, he attacked the Moncada barracks with around 160 men. It was a complete disaster. Half of them died or were executed on the spot. Castro was caught, put on trial, sentenced to 15 years in prison, but inside that courtroom, he delivered a speech that lasted 4 hours. 4 hours during which he transformed a military failure into a political declaration heard around the world. He closed with the words that would become legendary: "Condemn me. It does not matter. History will absolve me." He walked out of prison after just 2 years, pardoned, and more dangerous than he had ever been before. He left for Mexico. There he met Che Guevara for the first time. There he built a small, fanatical army prepared to die for him without hesitation. They returned to Cuba on a boat with 82 men. They were almost completely destroyed within hours of landing. Only 12 survived. 12 men hiding in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. No food, no resources, no realistic chance of winning. But Castro did not stop. He recruited peasants one by one. He won the sympathy of the international press through careful positioning. He built a movement from absolutely nothing. And within 2 years, Batista fled. Cuba was his. The first period was almost convincing enough to believe. Castro nationalized the land and distributed it to farmers. He built schools in villages that had never had one. He sent doctors to rural areas where medical care had never once arrived. Literacy rates across the island rose dramatically in just a few years. The world praised him endlessly. European intellectuals adored him completely. He was the perfect image of the romantic revolutionary fighting for the forgotten. But behind the image, something was happening. People who disagreed with Castro began to disappear, not metaphorically. They disappeared. Former allies executed without public trial. Journalists thrown into prison cells. Judges replaced with men personally loyal to him. Elections promised and never once organized. Freedom of expression, completely non-existent. Freedom to leave the island, forbidden entirely. Cuba was transforming every single day, and not in the direction anyone had been promised. When America realized what was happening, it tried to stop him. Economic embargo tightening around the island, international isolation cutting off supply lines, and the single greatest operational failure in the entire history of the COIA, April 1961. Approximately 1,400 Cuban exiles trained and funded by the CIA landed at the Bay of Pigs. The plan was to trigger a popular uprising against Castro from the inside. It was a complete and total disaster from the first hour. Within 72 hours, everything was over. The invasion collapsed. Kennedy was humiliated in front of the entire watching world, and Castro emerged more powerful and more untouchable than he had ever been. 1 year later, the Cuban Missile Crisis. 13 days during which the world stood at the edge of a third world war. Khrushchev had secretly installed Soviet nuclear missiles on Cuban soil. America discovered them through aerial surveillance. Kennedy ordered a full naval blockade around the island. For 13 days, nobody on Earth knew whether nuclear bombs would fall. Castro was at the center of this game between two superpowers, a chess piece on a global board, but a chess piece that believed itself to be the king. The crisis was resolved without war. Cuba survived, and Castro survived every single man who had ever tried to stop him. The CIA attempted to assassinate him over 600 times. 600. Poison pills slipped into his coffee, a diving suit laced with toxins, an exploding cigar designed to detonate in his face. 600 separate plans. Every single one of them failed completely. Castro joked about it openly. If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic sport, he said, he would win the gold medal every time. But while Castro laughed at the Americans, the Cuban people were paying the price for his survival. The island's economy was collapsing slowly, but without any possibility of recovery. Food rations grew smaller with every passing year. Freedom of expression did not exist in any form. Religion was suppressed and pushed underground. Gay men were sent to forced labor camps in the countryside. Any form of opposition was crushed immediately and completely. Hundreds of thousands of Cubans fled the island by any means possible. They crossed the open sea on improvised rafts built from wood and old tires. They risked everything they had for a chance to escape. Many of them died in the ocean before reaching any shore. All of this to escape from the paradise Castro had promised them. And yet, Castro remained, not because the people loved him, but because the system he had built left no space for anything else to exist. Informants placed in every apartment building across the country, neighborhood surveillance committees on every single street, neighbors reporting on neighbors, friends reporting on friends. An entire country transformed into a permanent network of mutual suspicion. Nobody could trust anyone around them, and without trust, there is no revolt possible. He outlasted Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush again, Obama, 11 American presidents. Every single one of them wanted to see him fall. Not one of them succeeded. He led Cuba for nearly 50 years. Handing power to his brother Raul in 2008 when his body finally gave out, dying in 2016 at the age of 90 years old, while millions of Cubans were living in deep poverty, while thousands were rotting inside his prisons, while an entire island was held captive by the ideas of a single man who never let go. How do we judge Fidel Castro, the hero who brought education and medicine to the poor and forgotten, or the dictator who stole the freedom of an entire people for half a century? Perhaps both of these things are true at exactly the same time. Perhaps that is the most frightening lesson Castro leaves behind, that the most dangerous people in history are never the obvious monsters. They are the ones who started with genuinely good ideas and chose power over people. Every single time, without exception, without regret, Cuba exists today. The same system still running, the same party still in control, the same walls still standing. Castro is dead, but his Cuba lives on, and it will continue to live long after the last person who remembers him has disappeared from this earth. That is the legacy of a dictator who believed himself to be a hero. A beautiful island, frozen in time, unable to move forward. A prisoner of one man's dream that never ended.